It's Saturday night and you're looking for some amusement before you go to bed. Would you rather turn on an Ultimate Fighting Championship event, which also known as the UFC, or would you rather turn on a boxing event? Some people would say that they'd rather watch a boxing event. I believe these people either underestimate how entertaining the UFC actually is, or they just haven't tried it before. Although there are many reasons to describe why the UFC is so much better than boxing, three can easily describe why it is better than boxing. So let's switch stance to our first 3 points. Our first point is the fighting decisions. The second point is the best always face the best. And the third point is the exciting types of fighting that you watch in the UFC. So let's transition to our first point, which is fighting decisions. Fighting decisions are a concept in both boxing and in the UFC in which judges decide a winner at the end of the fight if it goes the distance. Typically, fans want stoppages, which either end in knockout or submission, or in the UFC, there's submissions. In the UFC, fights end 3 ways: submission, knockout, or decision, which is already one more way you could win compared to boxing because they don't have submissions in boxing. And also, Scott Karasik believes that in the UFC, their decisions are already more fair than boxing. UFC fights end quicker in the UFC because the padding of the gloves are a lot less, which leads to bigger punches you already have different rules, which means you can fight on the ground. So once you knock someone down, you can immediately jump on them and start fighting them. So it just leads to more exciting stoppages and less controversial endings because you don't want to fight to go to decision because it's more controversial. The second point is the best always fight the best. In boxing, according to Thomas Love, there's a lot more weight classes in boxing, which leads to people can't fight each other because they're in different weight classes. In UFC, the weight classes are expanded, so more people can fight each other in different weight classes if you were in boxing. Also, boxing record is really important in the UFC or in boxing. You don't want to lose any fights in boxing, or else you lose out on big fights and you start making less money. So boxers know about this, and they tend to take full advantage of this, and they fight nobodies. They don't fight like people on their caliber because they never want to lose because they want the big fight. It's really rare that you find like these big, huge fights that are on the same caliber as each other. This leads to boring, non-competitive fights that are just not fun to watch after a while. This is a lot different in the UFC because there's a ranking system in the UFC. Champions will fight top 10 people, and they never fight nobodies because the UFC doesn't hold any nobodies. They don't. It's a group of people, a group of established fighters. This leads to exciting fights that are more fun to watch than boxing in general. Which leads us to our third point, which is the different styles of fighting. Boxing is only on your feet. You can't do any ground game or anything. And once you knock someone down in boxing, you have to wait 10 seconds for them to get back up, fully reset the fighters, and then you keep going on your feet. This leads boxing to be one-dimensional and boring in general, which compared to the UFC, you fight in many different ways. These ways include jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and also boxing. And also, once you get a knockdown in UFC, you could immediately jump on them and start doing these different techniques to end the fight earlier, which leads to more stoppages, which is more exciting and less controversial. So, if we do a recap, we talked about fighting decisions, best versus the best, and exciting types of fighting. So, before you spend your hard-earned money on a boxing pay-per-view, take a second and understand the benefits of a UFC fight, and really, and once you watch it, you'll understand why it is better than boxing, and you might find a new favorite sport in the process.